We are going to be talking about the best way to use the most popular spells in Disney Sorcerer's Arena. We're going to show you weird quirks and abilities you will not see in the ability descriptions. We are unveiling a new character because
we are FartKnight gamers, mobile players, paywall haters, entertainers, hot as lasers. Tell your neighbor, do a favor, you should subscribe, and you'll see more Knightlightning. He's not lightning, so enlightening, not so frightening. Hit like, and you'll see more. Who farted? He's who farted, not faint-hearted, nor outsmarted. Let's get started.
Welcome to FartKnight Gamers. We use salty language and have mature content on this channel. So if that is not your bag, baby, go to somebody else's channel.
And if you have little kids in the room, earmuffs.
Thank you, WhoFartd. Okay, let's get into it. We are going to be talking about the best ways to use spells in this game. So WhoFartd, what is a spell you would like to discuss?
Okay, starting off with arguably the best spell in the game for any person at any point in their, let's call it, development arc, Bucket of Soldiers.
Okay. Talk to me about Bucket of Soldiers. I'm not an expert, but you are, so sound it off.
So one of the few times that I got trigger happy on using my crystals is probably the best thing I did. So I must have been playing the game about 2 weeks when Bucket of Soldiers came out the first time. And I'm like, whoa, this does 700 damage. That's more than my characters do, being that I'm like level 20. So I used my crystals to unlock it because I definitely didn't have the Toy Story characters to do it. So Bucket of Soldiers is great in the sense of it allows you to automatically hit just on level 1 every time you use a basic, to also have it attack for another 700, 750 roughly in total damage. And it grows a little bit as you level up, but that's roughly where it sits around. And then it gets an additional turn. And when it gets a little additional turn, it does 2 soldiers, which does roughly about 1,500 damage. That's just on level 1. Once you hit level 2, then it adds a third soldier when it takes its turn, and then level 3 increases the damage, and then level 4 makes it you hit 4 soldiers. Now, let me say this: I have not encountered anybody who has level 4 yet, but that means that every turn it's going to do roughly 2,500 damage. That starts getting into the area of a decent mid-level character. That's a huge game changer, and that's more than most spells are going to do on one shot, let alone once a turn. So that makes it so much more powerful. So I think that there's even another level to this that people have not utilized properly because A, it's very hard to unlock, B, costs a lot to get to level 4, and C, Toy Story does not come around often. We've seen that second level of Toy Story with the Toy Story bad guys that is going to come around more frequently than Bucket of Soldiers. And I think that's by design because Bucket of Soldiers is potentially so good that hasn't been unlocked yet.
Yeah, I think the nice thing with Bucket of Soldiers is, especially in this new meta of a very evasion-heavy meta, where it's really nice to have a spell that attacks a single target multiple times, because if you have 1 or 2 stacks of evasion, you can clear those right out. So many characters now that summon other characters. So you have Bucket of Soldiers, you have, Kristoff summoning trolls, you have Scar summoning hyenas, you have shadows being summoned. I mean, Bucket of Soldiers assists on all of these summoned characters as well. Even if you have the Cauldron or Trigger's Tower, these are still other spells that Bucket of Soldiers can assist on. So,
and exactly, Trigger's Tower allows another turn for Bucket of Soldiers. If you're early in your development of the game, let's say before level 40, that's a game changer.
Now, let's get into a really weird quirk, something interesting. So with one of my favorite spells in this game, we have Peach Shadow. Now, let me just read this off of just a piece of this. That the Shadow has 30% of target teammates' statistics. So here's the thing. You're picking a target to copy, and at the base level, you have 30% of that teammate's statistics. There is a situation, though, where this is not true at all. And it's actually good that this is not true. The benefit is, let's say I have Aladdin on the field. If I use Shadow on my Shadow, I am not gaining 30% statistics off of the 30%. I am actually gaining 30% off of the main originally copied character statistics. Even if your shadows are just copying other shadows as the target, you're still gaining the benefit as if you copied the original target statistics. This matters for a few different reasons. The first big reason is, let's say your main character is dead and you only have the shadow copy alive. You're still gaining the benefit of as if that character is still alive and you're still able to carry on that same quality of copying. But there are actually a huge number of other benefits, and that's mainly this. And just want to show you a screenshot. So this is a perfect example, knowing this now, okay? This is a screenshot of a battle I was in. My primary actual Cobra Bubbles character has no buffs. My Cobra Bubbles Shadow, though, has tactics, and everyone who has dealt with Cobra Bubbles and tactics know that that's the main thing you want on this character. So in this case, when it comes to your decision making, we are actually much better off, even if though that Shadow has slow, because he has tactics, we're actually better off copying the Shadow character so that when your Shadow appears, your new Shadow, he's going to have tactics, as opposed to if I copy the original Cobra in this instance, he's not coming in the field with any buffs, because that's the interesting thing with Shadow. You're copying all the buffs and all the debuffs. This is what's important. This is why we wanted to do this video, because all of the other channels all talk about top 10 spells, and they always constantly changing the list because every few months the game changes, how the spells work, nerfs, buffs, and so forth. But almost nobody really talks about the best way to use spells. It's not necessarily the best spell if you suck at using it. And maybe you can have a spell that's not so great become great if you use it intelligently. So that's why I wanted to focus on this. But I also want to highlight, just sticking with the Shadow, look at these debuffs. Here's the thing. Remember what I said. The Shadow character copies buffs and debuffs. So for example, if I have Shadow in this situation, I have a Cobra Bubbles that's asleep, and I have a Cobra Bubbles that's awake. If I copy that sleeping character, he's going to come on the field unconscious. Same thing, my opponent, his Gantu is asleep. If he has Shadow and copies Gantu, he's going to pop on the field completely unconscious. Knowing these, you really want to be very careful of not just the character you want to use Shadow on, but when you do it, and hey, which version of your character you want to copy.
That's interesting. And I'd like to point out one thing to tie back to this whole thing that we have been talking about in many videos. So you're saying essentially Peter Shower. Yeah. So it's now Peter Pan has gotten a little sketchy. You know, he's got a spell about his shower. No, Peter's Shadow is bugged, and glue has not fixed it. Is that what you're saying?
It is one of the many things in this game that the language used to describe what something does is way off base.
I don't know. So there's off base, and then there's what you're describing as something entirely beyond that.
Well, you know what? Hold on. You're getting into an interesting point. So in terms of bugs, that is a great segue to this bad boy we could talk about for a minute. The very first line of Golden Hammer is bugged. This spell gains bonus charge when non-summoned teammates are defeated. This is bugged because this actually gains a bonus charge every single time any teammate is defeated, including summoned characters. That means summoned characters from other characters like Raja from Jasmine. That means characters that are summoned from spells like Shadow and Cauldron and Bucket of Soldiers and all the rest of it. So one great big tip, take advantage of this bug because everybody else is. This is why on defense for Sorcerer's Tournament, so many people put it on defense because they're not planning on beating you. They're planning on timing you out. A lot of people will just use like Midnight Countdown and the Shadow spell plus the Golden Hammer to just sap your time. And that's a great defensive strategy. It's something to remember when you're in Sorcerer's Tournament. Normally, when you're on offense and you're trying to climb the ranks, you have to win. But when you're on defense, there's two ways of winning. You can win or just prevent your opponent from taking your spot by running out that clock. And Golden Hammer is definitely one of the chief spells to use to just drain that clock.
Now, it's funny that you say that because anyone who's played Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes remembers that early on in the game development, there was a timeout strategy that existed, and that was the meta.
Interesting. I can see it. I can see it.
And to point out, a lot of people quit the game because of that. So this is something that Glue really needs to look into.
Absolutely correct. Now, let's jump into Fairy Slumber. This is probably one of the two most popular spells to run in the game. I loved it. I love it. I loved it before it even all the nerfs to the other spells, which kind of by default made this one of the best spells in the game. You put people asleep. It's an adjacent target area. Now, here's the thing. A very important line is it reduces speed meter. Now, caveat, mine is all the way leveled up. So you can't use mine as a base. But even at level 2, this thing is removing 30% speed meter. Why is this important? Fairy Slumber, you will not put characters to sleep if they, say, have evasion. But let me show you something very interesting. That's a strange quirk about this spell. Here's an example. We have my team. I'm fighting a Big Hero 6 team, and all of their characters have evasion. So if I use Fairy Slumber, which I have ready to go, it is not going to put them to sleep. However, that doesn't mean I shouldn't use it. And let me show you why. Look at the turn order at the bottom left here. We have Big Bad Wolf is going to go, followed by Baymax, followed by Honey Lemon. Here's what's interesting about Fairy Slumber. Even though what will not stick is putting them to sleep, that turn meter removal will still happen. So watch what happens, because turn manipulation is one of the most powerful things in this game. And I'm not saying every time, just go use Fairy Slumber. It's important to hit your right target if you can. But in this case, I was dreading Honey Lemon taking a turn because I really didn't want her to get going. So look what happens. They all have evasion. And look, my turn order is Big Bad Wolf, Baymax, Honey Lemon, then Go-Go. Watch what happens when I use this spell in the next hit. I hit it. Look, I removed enough turn meter from Go-Go and Honey Lemon that my Cobra Bubbles, which you couldn't even see in the turn order, jumped ahead of both of them. And now it's going to go right after Baymax. So even though Fairy Slumber will not put them to sleep, I didn't waste it because it sapped their turn meter. So it's important anytime you use spells, you really want to look at the turn order of what's about to come up, because that's really going to help you plan things. And especially for a spell, look, maybe this is a bug. I personally think even if this is a bug or if it isn't, this should be in, or let's say if it's not the bug that the spell is intended to work this way, it should be written in the text. This speed meter removal can't be prevented or something like that. But no, it just.
So I gotta say, me personally speaking, as someone who's had this impact him in a negative way, when I have whichever one on the Paul McCartney team is not the Moose. Sven?
Frozen Kristoff?
Kristoff, yeah, let's go with him. He's got an immunity to magic. So
Yeah,
I get
harmful
hit with
immunity.
the spell. He does not get put to sleep, but yet his turn meter is dropped. How is that possible?
Yep, exactly right. So you're saying even from harmful immunity, this removes turn meter.
Exactly.
Wow. See, that I wasn't sure of, but I'm glad you clarified that because you do run the Paul McCartney team. And
Yes.
Kristoff, unless somebody dies, or let's say unless Anna dies, he moves very slowly. So 30% turn meter, or sorry, excuse me, speed meter removal, or in my case with this leveled up, 40% speed meter removed on Kristoff is really making him not take his turn anytime soon.
And it's not quite as bad as me because I put a speed crystal on him.
Okay, interesting, just to get it off.
So because he's also got, I charge up the Moose and then I use his double attack.
Okay.
Often. So I speed him up a little more quickly, but still, it's something that's frustrated me lately.
Yeah, a lot of people can't stand. There's a whole group of people that cannot stand that this speed meter still gets removed and they're calling for the spell to be nerfed. But you know what I say? I say, you know what? As long as Golden Hammer can recharge on summon characters, they should never touch this spell. Because I'm sorry, the thing that's killing this game, if anything, is that clock. That having so many battles just time out because between Frozen and Big Hero 6 and the evasions, that's the biggest problem with this game right now, in my opinion.
I think that there are, and this goes back to something I said, and I won't harp on it. There are so many things Blue needs to fix to get this game right. Or a fix is also allowed to change the text. So we know what we're dealing with. But it's not a level playing field when, let's say, someone like you or I, who happen to queue in these things and understand it, versus somebody like Dancool, who's literally looking at the text, taking it as verbatim, and goes, all right, I'm not going to use that spell because it's not worthwhile in this situation. Or why the hell is this going wrong? Is my autoplay not working?
Are you implying Dancool looks at texts?
I'm assuming he references it at some point in time. I know he just reads the auto button, but still.
Yeah, he knows how to read auto. Yes, exactly. Let's jump to another one. Here's something to watch out for, people. Midnight Countdown, as I was mentioning before, is a great timeout spell. But if you're using it on like live PvP or on attacking, trying to advance your position in either Club Conquest or Sorcerer's Tournament, you have to be very careful because on evasion, you could have a problem. Because this is a spell, it takes a while to charge. But look at this. I'm facing a team. It's like a hybrid Big Hero 16 with Cobra Bubbles. And you'll see Hero and Go-Go and Honey Lemon has evasion. They all have evasion. And here I go. There goes my Midnight Countdown, ready to turn them, set the clock for turn them all into pumpkins. And boom. It's all resisted by the 3 people that had evasion. So it completely bypasses it. And here's the thing. With Midnight Countdown, that spell either hits or does nothing. And that's the thing. This spell doesn't even do damage. So if you miss turning someone into a pumpkin or starting that clock, it's useless. So what you really want to use, the big tip for spells like Midnight Countdown, where you're so dependent on the debuff landing, you really want to make sure that you have characters and maybe even spells that have AoE damage with this spell, because if you do not land, if you have evasion on these characters, when you go to finally hit this debuff to start that countdown and turn them all into pumpkins, you either never pull the trigger on casting a spell, or when you do, it's completely wasted. So my tip for a spell like Midnight Countdown, make sure you're running other AoE spells, or you have characters that have some good consistent AoE damage. A great one that comes to mind is Gantu, because if he has his charges built up, he can just spam AoEs all day long. A second one that falls into that category is actually Mortal Potion. And the reason is because Mortal Potion is one of the only spells, actually might be the only spell that clears taunts in the game. The thing with running Mortal Potion is you really want to be careful. And WhoFartd, you taught me this a long time ago, which was when you have a spell ready, you can't just pull the trigger. Sometimes it's worth waiting and figuring out when to land it. Because here's a great example. I have Mortal Potion ready to go, but here's the thing. Baymax, he doesn't have taunt. So why should I use Mortal Potion? I'm going to be so sad and disappointed when he gets taunt, unless you have another way of clearing that out. The other thing, too, is it's also, as strange as this sounds, Mortal Potion, again, is another important spell to run with other characters that have AoE damage or other spells that do AoE damage, because let's say Baymax finally takes his turn and taunts. If he's got that evasion on him, my Mortal Potion isn't going to clear anything. Other thing, too, remember, too, Mortal Potion, if we actually look at it, it only clears two buffs off the character. One of those could be taunt. So let's say you have a Kristoff with taunt and harmful immunity, and he's got, let's say, some heal over time. Let's say 2 heals over time, which we know Anna could throw out to him. If he has 4 buffs, one of which is taunt, you only have a 50-50 shot of taunt being included in that grouping with Mortal Potion. So you have other ways to clear those buffs or do damage or something else. Make sure to use that and have it part of your Mortal Potion repertoire. Let's jump to Dynamite. This is a popular spell. It does good damage, but it stuns the entire team, which is totally brutal if you pull it off. This is what's interesting about Dynamite, as opposed to, say, Midnight Countdown. Notice, similar scenario. Hero and Honey Lemon and Go-Go all have evasion. I go to use Dynamite, but check it out. It lands on everybody. So Dynamite, the debuff, will land through evasion. That is very helpful. But here's the thing. For you Big Hero 6 people, or even you Aladdin people, you know when that Dynamite goes off and it finally explodes after those 2 turns, if the person is at that point still sitting on an evasion, that explosion will be completely wasted. No damage, no stun. So even though you are safe to pull the trigger, as soon as you see Dynamite, just let it rip. You still have to be careful and want to start running, like I said, other AoE style attacks to try and clear out these stacks of evasion. So when this goes off, it's actually useful. WhoFartd, I want to ask you a question. What are some spells you think you really don't have to time, that you can just use whenever, as soon as it becomes available? Spells you don't have to think about.
I think we've already talked on the most obvious one. Bucket of Soldiers, use it whenever you feel like. There is no timing. Trigger's Tower is another one that the timing really doesn't matter. Anything that summons a character doesn't really matter. Then I would also put in some spells that just do AoE damage. So like Iago's spell. Yeah. Where there's not much, yes, it does purge one helpful effect, but it's so random that I would not say there's a skill to placing the timing of it. It's not that like you're just saying you're guaranteed to get that. And then lastly, I would also touch upon something like the cauldron, because the cauldron, you want to get it out as soon as possible. The longer it's out there, the more benefits gained. So there's not a timing ability or benefit from getting it out. The only benefit is the sooner the better.
Yeah, the only thing I would caution people a little bit with Cauldron, because the good thing about Cauldron is it charges fast. The only thing I would be cautious with, and because 99%, I completely agree with what you're saying about just get the Cauldron out there. The only thing I would suggest is take a look at that turn order, because the one disadvantage with Cauldron is it has very low health and can be killed off easily. So the one thing you want to look at right before hitting Cauldron is make sure they don't have a really strong, let's say, AoE attacker going next, like a Gantu or somebody, because it would suck if you put out Cauldron just for him to do like 3,000 AoE damage and see it disappear right away. But outside of that unique situation, I agree. Get the Cauldron out there, because you start getting that speed meter up and refreshing that magic, it is incredible. And that's actually a cautionary tale too, because while I am giving advice about looking at that speed meter, the turn order, Cauldron, when you're fighting against a team with Cauldron, this could completely throw this off. Like I could say, oh yeah, Baymax is definitely like on my team, right? My screenshot here. Oh yeah, Baymax is definitely going to go next, and then this person, and then this person. Actually, let me find an even better example. Let's say I use this example. Oh, you know what? Big Bad Wolf's going to go, and Baymax and Cobra's going to go, and then Gogo's going to go. But you know what? If there's a Cauldron on that other side, that's not necessarily true, because that Cauldron could throw speed onto Gogo and completely screw up whatever plan you just had. I cannot tell you how many times I've had like Fairy Slumber and like, okay, I'm going to wait just to do this person's turn and wait for their turn meter to build up a little bit so I can slam it back down. And then their Cauldron starts refilling that person's speed meter, and then I get killed or something. And then the whole thing was just completely wasted.
Exactly.
So I think we have a pretty good list here. I think another spell, spells that heal for the most part, you don't really have to think about using too, like Gramma Tala and Golden Hammer. The only thing with
okay, I'm gonna jump in on Gramma Tala on one thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, health regain at that level, just not worth it. If you're playing in the tower, I agree. Maybe there's a little more value, but to use this in PvP or PvE, it's just not enough.
Well, you know what? It's funny because when I read it and when I read it when it first came out, I thought the same thing. But I feel like I fought so many Ocean teams at this point that have completely wiped me out who have run this, that I feel like there's some element of this I'm underestimating. And maybe that's the Moana piece where she's gaining, cleansing harmful effects and gaining harmful immunity. That could be a part of it, but there are times that it slows down some things. The one thing I will say that is a pain in the ass is when I've gotten Elsa down to stasis finally and right about to kill her off, then somebody uses this and 25%. I guess the question is 25% of what? Because I think if you're fighting like tier 7 plus characters, 25% actually is a lot. But I would say at tier 6 or lower, maybe not so much. So I think it might depend, because I agree with you. The way I read this, it doesn't seem like that much.
And I have faced it. I don't think I faced it with the correct teams using it, but I faced it. And it's almost like you laugh a little bit. Like, really? Of all the big spells that are out there, you're using this?
Yeah, exactly. So again, we're not going to get into every spell in the game right now, because that would be like a 3-hour video. But we just wanted to give you folks an overview of some of the weird quirks and strange things that you can't actually read necessarily in the game. I mean, the only other thing that I would say for early players, do Caboom is a fantastic spell, especially if you're running a Shan Yu team, because Shan Yu takes such big advantage of critical hits, and that's what Vulnerable does. It guarantees a critical hit. So if you use Duke Kaboom right before your Shan Yu takes a turn, you're going to be smashing down that speed meter and doing massive damage, maybe even giving your Shan Yu a bonus turn. So who farted? We had some really sad news, and it was someone we both admired a lot who left this existence, unfortunately. But we felt that this could be a great opportunity to do something we had in mind, and this just kind of sped it up. So do you want to introduce our fake news guy for this week?
So just to give everybody background, and if some of our viewers are too young to know who he is, Eddie Van Halen passed away. So for anyone who grew up in the late 70s, early 80s, they heard Eddie Van Halen's guitar solos and they just went, wow. Like the first time I heard Eruption, geez, it was ridiculous. And the fact that they opened their first album, the first song is Eruption, was unbelievable.
And knocked you on your ass.
Oh, it really, really did. Like, I can even tell you, I bought that album, and I'm going to sound really old here, at the Virgin Megastore in Times Square. I must have been 16 at the time. Now, obviously that was much, much past when that album came out, because I think it was 79, 80?
Okay.
79, yeah. I think that album came out. So this was thankfully the 90s. I'm not that old, although I looked really good if that was the case. And just one track after the next, and then you find the next album. And okay, I'm going to say something that may divide some of our older users. Screw Van Hagar time period. I'm sorry. Eddie and David Lee Roth, best together. Sammy Hagar, great singer on his own, but it was no longer Van Halen. So I'm ranting, but either way, we lost one of the most amazing guitarists, and to me, the connection of great creative guitarists that took over from Jimi Hendrix and took it through the 80s on that popularity scale. Yes, there were the Yngwies. Yes, there were the Steve Satrianis. Wow. Steve Vais and Joe Satriani of the world. But either way, he was the torchbearer of that level of creativity that nobody saw coming. He took tapping from something that a few guys were doing to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, look, tapping became a thing because Eddie Van Halen was on planet Earth. So that's what I think anyway.
Nobody could do it, control it, and make it just sound so awesome.
Yeah.
And absolutely. Yes, I'm a massive Randy Rhoads fan. But even in the 4 years from the point that Van Halen's self-titled came out to Diary of a Madman came out, and yes, Randy Rhoads took tapping to a next level, but it was all because of the first 3 Van Halen albums that just kind of inspired him. So either way, I went on a rant. Big Van Halen fan, big loss, but I would like to introduce our new character that is coming to the game, Vanhellin.
Yeah. All right. I'm so excited about this. I think Hades, now that Van Halen's spirit is now in the afterlife. Again, sometimes we like to talk about alternate timelines here. Now that Van Halen's spirit is in the afterlife, he teaches Hades how to play the guitar, and Van Hades becomes Van Halen.
I think that this means one big thing, and this will mean a lot for Ralph Macchio's career. We could have a Crossroads 2 movie that mixes with The Devil Goes Down to Georgia.
Yeah.
And really have the ultimate face-off.
Yeah, I'd like
Ralph Macchio versus the devil.
Yeah, that's a great point. For those of you who have not seen Ralph Macchio's movie Crossroads, that is one of the coolest endings in any movie ever. But let's get into it. His basic is called Fire Fingers, and I see his fingers on fire because Eddie just taught him how to just go crazy on that guitar so fast that his fingers are literally being lit aflame. And I'm thinking this is a single target attack, but because he's hitting these notes so fast, these notes are actually dealing like audible damage to characters. So they maybe become dizzy or something and enchanted, and it's doing like multiple individual tiny hits of damage, like hits them like 10 times in like a second because he's moving so quick.
I like that. I think that's the exact thing that I would expect.
What do you think Eruption, his first special, is going to be?
So I am just imagining that first big chord that he hits at the start of Eruption, just to go, and right before he goes into it, that hits, and it does an AoE damage where it shoots fire right out of the guitar because of its so awesomeness, and spreads out and does a concussive blast to every character and does a large amount of damage, and that they have a new buff that comes out that hits randomly on any of the characters called Sheer Awesomeness. And it works very similar to a cross between a stun and a slumber, a sleep, where you're just mesmerized and you can't do anything for one turn.
I love it. That's awesome. And no, you can't debuff. You can't cleanse it. You can't cleanse Mesmerize.
No.
Nothing's gonna.
Unless we introduce a Jimi Hendrix character who could do an alternate Mesmerize, I really don't see how that's possible.
Yeah, I think that alternate Mesmerize might be called Purple Haze.
Ooh, I think we've got the start of a new character.
There we go.
Does Disney own the rights to Jimi Hendrix yet?
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised at this point. His second special is called Hot for Teacher. And we have a photo here of Hades caressing Meg. So what the hell is this going to be?
So I'm imagining that this will be a similar thing to Mesmerize, but it's going to be a mass Mesmerize that's guaranteed. That, like, he's going to go through a chord progression as part of his animation, and you're going to have all 5 characters immediately mesmerized. As you can see, it takes 4, it's a 4-turn charge, but it's possibly the most powerful attack in the game because it will take an entire team from being active to attack to not being able to attack for 1 turn.
Interesting.
Because they are mesmerized because
be
the teacher called.
That's cool. What I think Hot for Teacher could be is maybe for like 2 turns, vanhellin is just building up his power, and every turn he gets like a cumulative power up and he can't take damage unless it's a female character that hits him. Is the only thing that could take him out. So Hot for Teacher is he keeps getting hot, but the only thing that's going to stop him and draw his attention away from just wiping out the team is if a Jasmine or an Anna or Elsa is the one that actually does Van Halen some damage because he's Hot for Teacher.
Interesting.
His first passive is called Unchained, where he just, I don't know, maybe this is something similar to what he has. As he loses health, he does greater damage.
As we all know, and anyone who doesn't know, go on YouTube and look it up. Eddie Van Halen concerts, whether it be him just playing for fun, him playing with Van Halen, the longer he played, the more awesome and creative. And you never knew what was going to happen next. Because you'd start the show and they play all the stuff standardly. By the end of the show, it was just free-form. And you'd never hear that guitar solo before, but you'd see it now. So I am assuming that Unchained, A, it's building up his damage to a lesser degree than Hades. but it is randomly giving his team buffs that you don't know what it is. Because much like Eddie Van Halen's creativity, you never know where it went. Random buffs are spreading around to the rest of his teammates, much like his band.
That's awesome. So like maybe like at the start of his turn, it's like the infinity dice, except there's only one buff that randomly gets assigned to one of his teammates. That is super cool. I like that a lot. His second ability, and we have a picture of the man himself, Eddie Van Halen here, is called Legendary Soloist. Now, this is what I was thinking. Maybe this is a character who has an exceptional amount of health. So maybe he's very often the last person that gets killed off, but maybe there's a certain ability that triggers that makes him super powerful if he's the last individual character left on a team, if he's running solo, as a little pun there. So maybe if he's running solo, that's when he can really bring out his soloist skills and do an attack that could potentially wipe out the whole team. A great example, what if he was something like if Van Halen is brought down, if he's the last character left on the field, maybe there's a countdown clock. If you don't kill him in 2 turns, boom, the rest of the team, the opponent's team is just wiped out.
I like that. I like that.
Kind of similar to Davy Jones, similar kind of mechanic where you have the dead man's chest show up. And if you don't get rid of that in a timely fashion, it's big. You just got a headache on your hands.
I like it. I think that is the perfect way to cap the Van Halen character.
Okay, I want to do a few YouTube comment shout outs. But first, I want to begin with something that was not there. We actually had a longtime follower of ours quit the game. But here's what he told me in a private message. He told me that while he was quitting the game because he was sick of a bunch of things, he would still follow us. And I apologize if I brutalize his name, but it's Jobin Kronoki or something to that effect. And I just want to quote him here. This is what he said when I asked him why he quit. He said, honestly, I've been thinking about it for a while. It comes down to one thing, really. There's nothing to do. I'm going to keep up with y'all's content, though. Throw in some comments to keep it fun. And maybe you'll fill me in on new stuff that's coming, and I'll come back. So, sir, we appreciate your comment. We appreciate you being a viewer and a longtime supporter of ours. We're thrilled that while Disney Sorcerers Arena is not something you're doing all the time, that you still enjoy our content enough to still watch us. So we really appreciate that.
No, I think that's a big compliment that, we're enjoyable enough, which we're very surprised that there's enough of you out there that actually want to hear us rant and just BS that we would normally do over the phone. Really cool, but even more so that somebody's willing, even since they've gone long past the game. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, we appreciate it, folks. And we appreciate you, James Wiggins. I really liked your comment and suggestion to really go into abilities a little more in depth and try to do a whole series of videos, or at least a video breaking down the kits of the Sensational Six and Eric and Triton more. Now, let me just go on a slight tangent here. One of the reasons that WhoFartd and I really decided not to break down Daisy's kit too much, or Triton or Eric's in the last video, is because we are only getting drips and drabs of what some of these teams are really going to be like. And yes, even though Eric and Triton's kit do reference raid specifically, until a raid comes out, we don't know if they're really going to be the best raid characters. So one thing a lot of other YouTube channels do is they'll hype up a character or a team or a spell, and then a month later they'll be walking back their comments and saying, oh, actually, no, this is totally different. Oh, like okay, when Big Hero 6 came out, almost everybody was saying that Fred was like the worst part of the team. And now everybody's like, oh no, Fred is like legit amazing. So one of the advantages that WhoFartd and I, one of the reasons why WhoFartd and I kind of take wait and see approach is without a lot of information, we don't like to make strong recommendations one way or the other. We love speculation, don't get me wrong. We love to throw possibilities to everybody, but we are not people who are going to say, yeah, go out and farm this character because they're going to be amazing and this and that. No, unless we really feel that way, we're damn certain of it. We don't feel that we're just going to lead our subscribers and viewers astray just to get maybe extra clicks on a video.
Exactly. That's the whole thing, is that this is not a game where, let's say you would go and unlock a character on something like, let's say, a PlayStation or an Xbox game, and that's what it is. I think that, as we've learned, every character needs to marinate for a little bit. And by marinate, I mean glue has to knock them down a couple pegs or clarify for their mistakes. And then we really know what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I'll be, as an example, like when I saw Goofy's kit, I love that guy's kit, man. I think they did him so well. I think he is so interesting and so fantastic. If it was me personally, if I had the capability to go all in on Goofy, I would. But still, I don't know what all the other Sensational 6 teammates are gonna do. And while I can see a bunch of really cool combinations already, given the kit, the fact of the matter is we haven't seen that much play of this character because he just came out. And as we've just demonstrated, a lot of things as they read are not the underlying reality. A lot of things are bugged. So I'm not going to tell you to go farm a character because maybe his passive ability doesn't even work. It's like, come on.
Exactly.
I want to shout out my friend Cobb. I appreciate the compliment and that you're kind of with us on everything as well. So thank you so much. I really appreciate what you said, and I appreciate you actually giving us an idea of what your kind of farming strategy is, and why you're not going all in on certain things like the Triton Tower.
So I've got to say something about last week that we reported during a shout out of someone who had contacted me, and I would like to get very serious about this. Dan Cool reached out asking for everyone to possibly give him more potions. He received 0 potions since that date. He still does not have enough to utilize just to get his character's basic abilities up. So he is very distraught and is spending more time on his My Little Pony adventures, where apparently potions are plentiful. So I wish Dan Cool the best of luck on his more emphasis on the My Little Pony adventures.
Well, I just want to say to Blue Chappenstein, thank you for breaking down your perspective, exactly what happened with the whole spooky coin gate situation. So I think you summarized it very nicely. But while you did give more context, still think the devs are definitely pulling some BS there. WhoFartd, I think we are at our end point, no?
I think we are, but I'd just like to add in one very important thing with this video. If you don't already own, and I'm going to sound old, the CD or cassette, go onto YouTube, go onto Spotify, Van Halen self-titled, go buy it, go download it, whatever it is, you're welcome.
Thank you, folks. Hit like, hit subscribe. We will see you next time.